So a fan requested that with The Boys, the show The Boys, now having finished, that I repost my original review episode from The Boys when it first started airing, which originally aired on The Escapist, with maybe some follow-up thoughts, which is a pretty good idea. So I'm going to do that. The show has now concluded, so there's obviously going to be spoilers with whatever I have to say. I'm just going to play the episode right now. I'm not actually sure how this holds up, since this was at least 5 or 6 years ago, but let's see what I have to say. As ever, please like, subscribe, share the links, show the links, give people the links to the show, Patreon, Coffee, etc., etc. Throw that up right now. Yeah, there you go. I think I'm supposed to say hit the hype button if you're watching this on mobile. I actually completely forgot that I had not put this one up on the regular channel, so here's that. And after the break, I will come back in and talk some more about it. Depending on what I have to say, we may break this into 2 episodes if I end up going on. Let's see how this holds up. Alright, so The Boys is a heavily promoted Amazon Prime series loosely based on a mature audience's comic book series from Garth Ennis, which I approach with an interest and a certain amount of trepidation also. On the one hand, Ennis is a pretty consistently good writer of hard, edgy, nasty stuff when he's on his game. On the other hand, when he's off his game, he can indeed represent the worst and most self-indulgent side of the genre and the medium, where cheap edgelord provocateurism stands in for depth and adolescent politically incorrect posturing is passed off as satire. And too often, that's the side that rears up its head when he takes aim at poking at the superhero genre, typically ending up with a badly lopsided ratio of actually interesting observations versus tacky, bad widow boy sniping about his resentment at the sway it holds in the medium. The Boys comic, while it had its moments, was something like the apotheosis of this. Effectively a personal killing floor for Ennis to vent his hatred of mainstream DC, Marvel, etc. in an alt-reality where superheroes exist, but as corporate-managed, virulently corrupt, Caligula-esque debauched predators of those they claim to protect who are covertly resisted only by the Boys. A CIA-backed anti-superhuman black ops team consisting of wisecracking, rule-breaking, snarly badasses powered by disaffected teenage boy resentment and the ability to call forth Garth Ennis socio-political viewpoints at will. Like I said, it had its moments of inspiration, but for the most part, the repeating formula of superheroes do something murderous and or rapey, casting a comic book trope in a negative light for shock value, the Boys do something similarly transgressive in response, isn't everything just shit, was numbing, and the political philosophical digressions were never as deep as they thought they were. My hope was that the show, in aiming to appeal to a general audience with a broader swipe at the modern aesthetic of superhero-saturated popular culture, would recognize the benefit in skimming off Ennis intergenre resentments and recognize that everyone is an asshole all the time about everything might make for good score settling, but good drama significantly less so. And for the most part, that's overall the case. Amazon's version of The Boys is a lot more compelling as a story, features characters who feel like characters, and has a clever, twisty narrative to tell that also pulls off an above-average pitch-black R-rated humor version of its admittedly also pared-down, notably simplified riff on the core concept, i.e. what if superheroes were reckless, overpowered assholes who cause more damage than they're worth, and guys like Lex Luthor who mainly exist to be pains in their ass were actually protecting the rest of us. Jack Quaid makes a cool lead as an everyman who awkwardly hooks up with the Boys to get revenge after his girlfriend is killed as collateral damage by a careless action by a member of a corporate-backed Justice League, Avengers, etc. pastiche called the Seven. Erin Moriarty is said super team's idealistic but rapidly having it beat out of her new recruit who also starts dating Quaid without either being initially aware of the other's secret day job, and Karl Urban shows up to steal the show as Karl Urban, playing the Karl Urban role from every project Karl Urban turns up in, a grumpy, jaded roughneck killer who shoots guns and makes exposition sound cool. It's impressive looking, it's funny, it's well cast, just nasty enough, the gags are solid, it doesn't wear out its welcome, etc., etc. This really isn't a review, but I liked it and I'll watch season 2, sure. That said, I was left with a persistent nagging impression that while I was enjoying The Boys more than I expected to, what I was watching was consistently just not as good as it should be. Cutting but not sharp enough, naughty but not really dirty, creepy but not really dark, and punchy without ever really being as brutal or as, well, mean as it seemed to think and kept insisting that it was. I don't know that it really landed for me until a moment midway into the first half where Quaid's character Huey briefly returns home and we see his bedroom for the first time and it's full of superhero merchandise, meaning that he used to be a Seven fanboy, and in a fit of rage he trashes the place. It's meant to be the dark version of a come-to-Jesus moment, since he's our point-of-view character, and his personal journey of adopting the Boys, the teens, through the looking-glass view of superheroes as a shitty force of evil and disorder in the world over that of the naive hero-loving public is meant to be a mirror of our being taught a lesson about how dumb and tasteless we're supposed to be as an audience for watching corny, formulaic Marvel movies or whatever, by our watching of The Boys, the show. But it didn't really land for me as much beyond recognizing the symbolic intent of, yeah, that makes thematic sense, and having thought on it, the reason I think the satirical part just doesn't connect, despite being coherent and the rest of it being otherwise well-made and well-acted, is that it's curiously detached from any kind of topicality to match the edge it's aiming for. As if even though The Boys has gladly thrown out a lot of the storyline, backstory, and characterizations of the almost decade-old source material, its sense of humor and socio-political radar for satire is still profoundly arrested near the turn of the millennium, if not earlier, regarding both the real world and the comic book world. The comic book side probably represents the most missed opportunity, especially since, if nothing else, it feels like the reason to do this property would be to deliver the nasty jokes at the expense of the genre Disney and Warner Brothers won't do, and Deadpool can only do once every few years. And while The Boys has funny jokes, it's an early not great sign that they don't seem to have updated the reference book to mock the present state of the genre's world-dominating stature. There's a season-length running joke at the expense of how much, well-deserved because he's an asshole, abuse is going to be dumped on the Seven's Aquaman stand-in, all premised on jokes about how no one likes Aquaman because he's a dorky hero who talks to fish and isn't that silly, which is an interesting place to go for parody, considering this character has been rebooted into this buff badass with the biggest box office in the DC universe. Same deal with the subplot about Moriarty's character Starlight arguing with the corporation about changing her costume from a sort of Bible Man version of She-Ra into a more sexed-up version, which works in the story for her character, but is presented in a way that keeps elbowing the audience in the ribs like, whoa, hey, did you notice that they draw girl superheroes to show a lot more skin than the guys? That's kind of funny, right? As though the writers have made a profound discovery about comic book tropes, and they're desperately excited to point it out and take the genre down a peg, and it's like, guys, okay, but the absurdity of sexy costume things was a joke they were doing in, like, Supergirl, when it was still on CBS. I mean, it would almost be more edgy if they were telling her, like, her normal costume was too sexy, or having some parody of the current back-and-forth debate in comics aesthetic about the objectification and male gaze versus genuine empowerment and sexual agency, but that wouldn't fit with the ultimately underdeveloped side plot of the corporation positioning the Seven as an implicitly Christian, God-ordained enterprise, which, as it is, already feels thematically out of step with the aesthetic dimension of the satire. Sure, the abject absurdity of evangelical entertainment subculture is easy picking for laughs, and it always has been, but let's get real here. The obvious go-to reference for the big joke of a powerful multinational corporation that produces superhero movies, toys, merch, and comics also being a looming threat to global security and life on Earth itself because they own actual superheroes, their licensing is clearly... And the Disney Marvel Cinematic Universe pop culture monopoly isn't scary, even if you enjoy the movies, because it's part of or even similar to the relative niche that is the American evangelical far right. Disney is scary because they've managed to generate their own quasi-spiritual yet secular, feel-good, poptimist, hope-punk consumer identity that's at once outwardly progressive yet still market-driven capitalist that functions like a religion but much more broadly and self-sustainingly. In other words, you shouldn't worry that Mickey Mouse and Queen Elsa are going to pop up on screen one day like, hey kids, our friend Jesus says it's time to take up arms and overthrow the government. You should worry they don't need to mention that third guy. Which is why, even while it's a fun character and a good, possibly star-making performance from Anthony Starr, the most dated, 1997 set of jokes in the show is Homelander, the evil Superman-Captain America hybrid leader of the Seven, being this hypocritical but enthusiastically performative, right-wing, jingoistic, all-American, traditional, in his own words, John Wayne type, with the show playing it straight that an otherwise familiar modern world would buy into this. Even as reality has told us that the audience Homelander describes as my people at one point, these days we know are more into a dude who's got more of an, Edward Blake the comedian energy. Yes, fine, it's setting up a Bush uses 9/11 and lies about WMD to go into Iraq analogy as the big bad guy conspiracy plot. Like I said, it really does feel like they wrote all of this out a decade ago and didn't update any of the reference points or metaphors. But America actually did take a box office vote on its preference for an I'm scared about terrorism, please give me a fantasy about beating its superhero, and he wasn't John Wayne. Clearly. So yeah, I like the show. I think it's got a lot of potential. I really enjoyed it, and the way it wrapped up was very interesting, but I feel like it's missing an opportunity by focusing its gun on too many of yesterday's targets. Also, it's weird that The Boys is a lot more about the heroes than it is about the boys, but that's probably an artifact of adaptation for TV. But it does, like I said, wrapped up in a way that I won't spoil, but suggest they're going to keep diverging from the source, so maybe they've got something really big up their sleeve. Hopefully, some more current-minded bite to the writing will be part of it, because I really do want to like this more than I did. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture.
Wow. So I fucking nailed it, right?
Yeah, look, real talk. I'm always hesitant to go back to my early work by even a few years, not just because I'm someone who believes in treating opinion journalism, which I feel like this job more or less falls under the rubric of, as this set-in-stone thing, and the whole never apologize for anything mindset of public personhood really should have died out even before it became like a whole Trump guy thing. But look, the fact is, if I'm going to criticize things from a looking backward perspective, then I really can't exempt myself from that, and another fact is, you should just acknowledge that opinions can change and you can have been wrong about things. I mean, not like the two are exactly related, but The Boys' first season came out in 2019 and it's now 2026. That's 7 years, and that's about the timeline for like all your body's cells to completely regenerate. Not by like 100%, there's some variation in the less and more, but basically I'm literally not the same person I was when I made that episode or like any of the content I made before that. On a certain level, it makes sense to just reinvestigate and even relitigate it because, like, hey, literally, totally different guy here now, right? But yeah, on the other hand, you should own what you do and not dwell on the past and just move forward. Valid arguments, two minds. Bottom line, in this case, doesn't matter because I had the boys basically dead to rights straight from the start. Yay me. But yeah, I think it eventually ended about the way it started. I think the finale was fine. The whole thing went on maybe a little too long. I think they kind of said and resaid everything they were ever going to say by the end of season 2, and it was a lot of jogging in place, but the actors were generally good. They were strong characters and so on. No, I don't think we need any more spin-offs. I think they squeezed all the juice out here. I know they're doing spin-offs in general, but I look forward to seeing what everybody does next and so on. But in general, my appraisal of The Boys 7 years ago was that it was a pretty good, especially when you consider it was based on really bad comics, but not great thing that had the potential to be a lot better, and I kind of saw how it could be better, but I also suspected it probably wasn't going to get there, or if it did, it wouldn't maintain it, and looking at how it all shook out, yeah, I was more or less right on that one. And look, here's the long and short of it. When I was asking, can The Boys be better than this in season 1, what I was more or less asking of it was, can The Boys make The Boys season 2? And they did that. They did the hell out of it. And unfortunately, sometimes there's nowhere to go from success than down or just kind of coast until you're done. Now, I do have more to say now that it has actually wrapped and ended. Yeah, absolutely. But like I said, I'm going to split that off into a separate follow-up video, so this one can go into the classics playlist eventually. Does this count as me maybe double or triple dipping? Yes, it does. Welcome to independent video production and distribution in 2026.
Why did we have to come to a Burger King to read the map?
Because the economics of television have changed. Have it your way.
So I will see you on the other side of that.